Hey everyone, this is Austin Schur here with We Write About Music, and today I'm speaking with The Agency. They've got a fantastic new covers album. It is called To Be Arranged. I'm super excited to talk to George all about it. George, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. How are you doing? What's going on?
I'm great. Thank you, Austin. It's always good to see you. I am here actually in Opus Studios in Berkeley, California. This is where we recorded that first album. We are in the midst of finishing up some tracks for another album that's going to be coming out in the coming months. So super exciting time and really pleased to be talking with you about it.
Nice, man. Like I said before we started recording, I'm super excited about this. I've listened to everything you got on YouTube, and it's fun for me because like my parents raised me on the oldies. And
There
then,
you go.
as someone who I'd consider slightly younger, I listen to everything that's current. So the fact that you've taken everything, made it into one thing is just like it's one blast from the past, and the music is just pure joy. It's something that I could listen to at all times.
Well,
I
I really appreciate that. And we had so much fun doing it. And that was the approach I had is to say, look, this is my debut effort. And I'm not a super youngster, and so I've learned enough in life that the first time you do something, there's going to be rookie mistakes. So I figured if
sure.
I've been waited this long to make an album, why don't I make the rookie mistakes using someone else's songs? But then the creative side of me came in and said, yeah, but if you're going to do just covers, you really better do it something out of the box that's going to blow people's minds. So that's where I came
True.
with the idea of let's do some crazy mashups of songs that some of them are pretty obvious that they fit together, right?
Yeah,
Nights in White Satin and Nothing Else Matters. I mean, anybody who's played the guitar for 15 minutes knows that those two songs are
exactly.
basically the same. Other ones, really don't make sense, like King Crimson and Taylor Swift going together.
Right. That was
Um,
the true. That was the one that I was like, just sing the title for it. I was like, what in the hell? It works. It works. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess that's kind of the first thing here is like when you're creating a covers album, something that is original but isn't pulling from the original, and you have literal millions of songs to pick from. How do you go about narrowing down what you think you want to make?
Well, some of these I had in mind for years and years and years. Like I mentioned, when Nothing Else Matters came out in the 90s, I'm like, well, that's like I grew up listening to, CB in the New York area with CBS FM
Sure.
101.1, Cousin Brucey. Like that was the oldie station. So, I mean, the Moody Blues and the Beatles and all that stuff was just ingrained in me, music as part of a musical education. So, you started to, when you start playing music, realize that things are in common. And then as time goes on, a lot of these things had occurred to me over time. And I thought, oh, that would be cool to put them together. But then, I mean, what I was fortunate to be able to do was to put together a cast of amazing session guys to help me realize all of that because I couldn't do that on my own. I mean, I had the idea for these things, but and in a lot of the mashups, and mashups is a thing on YouTube.
Yeah, of
But it's
course.
usually just people just with an acoustic guitar with a pretty simple song. And most songs these days are, those four chords. And okay,
Right.
like that's pretty obvious. But I try to do it in a way that's a bit more sophisticated, sometimes a lot more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe it doesn't work. It works for me. It may not work for everybody, but it was just a lot of fun and it was good to experiment doing all of that.
Nice. So what does the actual blueprint look for making these? For example, like you've got two songs, what's the first step to really putting them together?
Well, technology has helped a lot, obviously. So, years ago, you wouldn't, I would have had this idea, but how am I going to do it? How am I going to put together the framework of it without paying musicians and spend a week putting together backing tracks? I mean, the great thing today is that you can find stems. I mean, what I did is I just found stems on YouTube of the beat or the bass line or the isolated vocal of a song. So, for example, taking Billie Jean and Roundabout, right?
Yes.
Like a classic 80s song, a classic 70s song, like iconic bass lines. And I thought, okay, well, the but the basic chords are basically the same. The
Yeah.
underlying chords are the same. So I said, all right, what am I going to do? Well, it's easy enough because those are iconic songs to
Mhm.
find the isolated parts. So I would rip them, import them into, at the time I was using GarageBand. Since I'm happy to say upgraded to Logic, but
Nice.
put them into GarageBand. You can tune them down because Billie Jean was in a different key than Roundabout, and then adjust the rhythm so that the tempo matches. And then you just start figuring out, okay, the chorus of this song with the melody of the other song, or the bass line of this song with the melody of the other song and just experimenting and seeing what fits.
Nice. So it's a lot of, I suppose, trial and error to get these.
Yeah, it's a lot of mad scientists. I mean, there were a lot of nights where I was up at 4 in the morning like a crazy person in front of the computer, putting these things together.
Exactly. Like I have to imagine in your case, There's been plenty of like aha moments where you're driving in the car and you're like, well, wait, what if these two songs went together? What would we do?
Well, it's funny, like the one we mentioned with Taylor Swift, because I always liked that song style.
Sure,
Okay, it's a
sure.
simple song, but it was always catchy to me, and I thought, you know what? Let me do that. I want to do a cover of that, but like in an odd time signature or something. Then I started playing it. I'm like, wait a second, these first two chords are the same chords as Frame by King Crimson. So it just kind of, then the mad scientist mode kicks
Right,
in, and then
exactly,
that's
exactly.
how it happened.
Listen, I could make the argument that kind of like hearing the beat patterns and the tones and whatever octave it might in is just as important as creating original music because at the end of the day, yes, and like I said, these songs are coming from different eras, different decades, but at the same time, it's still very much an art form of putting them together. You see mashups on YouTube all the time, you see them on all over social media, but truly the actual art of putting it together is a science, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Well, I appreciate that because it was a lot of work and it was also a lot of research to figure out because
Yeah.
as you know, and we'll probably talk about, this album is only on YouTube because of
Right.
copyright restrictions. So these are not samples for anyone who wants to go. These are all replayed. The songs are mashed up, but every part is replayed. There's nothing sampled on here. That's still not, you don't have the right to do that.
Yeah.
Anyone has the right, and people who are new to this may say, "Oh, how much money do you have to pay to do a cover?" And the answer is a pittance because you get a mechanical license and it's automatic. In the case of a mashup, if I take, for example, when I took 25 or 64 and Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger by Daft Punk and the Kanye West Stronger version, I don't have the right just to put those together and say, "Oh, well,
Well,
I can credit all the songwriters," because the way you'd have to do it is that's called an interpolation because you're changing the intent of the original composers. You're
mhm.
changing the intent of the composer, and therefore you'd have to get permission from each of those people, and they would have to agree on a split of the royalties of publishing,
Right.
which basically means the amount of money I'm going to spend recording 2 days with like amazing session pros here, I would spend that in 3 hours of a lawyer's time trying to
Exactly.
deal. And the answer is going to come back no anyway.
Right.
Like trying to get Michael Jackson's estate to agree to license a melody of his for interpolation. I mean, it's basically a hopeless cause. And so I said, all right, YouTube, because they have arrangements with the big record companies, that's why you see all these mashups on YouTube because
Yeah.
they automatically allocate the royalties. So I thought, all right, at least it's a place to get it out there.
Sure.
And if people want to find it, they can find it. It was fun for me to do. It was fun to get the band's muscles flexed and to have a direction for where we're going in the future. So I'm really really pleased with the result.
No, you should be. It's a very solid answer too. I want to know though, I listen, like I said, there's probably been a ton of trial and error. Has there ever been anything that you've tried to make work but you couldn't, either genre wise or artist wise?
Yeah, there were other ideas that I had, and it just didn't click. Like these ones, I mean, we were discussing in the studio the other day that you can spend 20 years making your first album, right? But then if you're
Yeah.
successful, then what about your second album? So I was fortunate to have had, I've got a few gray hairs. I've had years to think about all of these, so I was able
Sure.
to really pick the things that I knew would work because I had evolved them over time. If you had
Mhm.
asked me to make another mashup covers album and put it out next year, it would not be as good because it really takes time to figure this out. And I'm not the type of person who wants to just rush and put things out. I want it to really be good and be proud of it to put it out there. So yeah, there were other ideas that I had, but they didn't click, or the other guys weren't feeling it, and so those went to the wayside. And then others came up late in the process, like the King Crimson Taylor Swift one. That came up. That was the last one that we recorded after
Okay.
everything. That was in a separate session after everything else had been done. Just because I thought, all right, that can work. Let's do that.
Nice. I'm really happy you did because it's the last one that I listened to, and I think it's the one that blew me away the most. Purely on the fact that I'm like, this shouldn't be
This shouldn't work. Yeah.
together. This shouldn't exist, but thank God it does because it's
Well,
so
I'm glad you said that because
right.
the amazing thing for me was trying to promote these things
Yeah.
because they're not on Spotify, they're not on Apple Music, so you can't promote them in the traditional way.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, let me go on Reddit and let me find all the groups and the Facebook groups devoted to these bands.
Exactly.
And the King Crimson people were just not having it. And like, no,
Really?
no, this is wrong. No, I mean, some of the moderation wasn't
Yeah.
really agreeing with all that. but I happened to post it on a Taylor Swift group, which has, millions and millions of
Yeah,
people.
you'll get an
And
answer
I
in a
was
second.
amazed to find people who were huge King Crimson fans, like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I would like,
What?
wow, I didn't expect to find King Crimson fans on a Taylor Swift, subreddit,
I
but
have
yet
to
they
assume
are. So,
zero crossover whatsoever, but okay. Very interesting.
yeah.
Listen, so you're in the studio right now. I assume you're at the beginning of the day. I want to know like what's the goal? What's been the plan since you've been there?
Okay, so basically the guys I have here, I don't play. I mean, I write, and these are originals that we're working on now. So
Sure.
I write and I put together demos and send that to the guys and the charts. And that's kind of how we work. We come in with demos and a chart, and then I say this is kind of the way I want it to go, or I say I don't really have an idea where I want it to go. Let's just see what the band feels, and we live track until
Yeah.
we've figured it out. So I've got Dan Feisley, a bass player from here from the Bay Area. He's also engineering. Amazing bass player with experience in a lot of different genres. And he and I actually went to high school together. And so
Nice.
he's been a music lifer. And so he's kind of been my guru for all of this process. That's why I came out here to Opus Studios because he works out of here frequently.
Got it.
Fernando Perdomo out of the LA area, who's a session pro who's played with everybody from Jacob Dylan and Nora Jones to Yes to I
Sweet.
mean that was amazing. That the summer of 2022, we record Roundabout at his studio in LA. And a few months later, Alan White, the longtime Yes drummer, died. And who did the band, because Steve Howe couldn't make it to the memorial concert for Alan. So who did the band call to fill in? Fernando. So Fernando texts me after playing a Roundabout on stage with the band with
Yeah.
the Yes logo on the bass drum and saying,
Sure.
you know, um, same song, same guitar, bigger room.
Yeah, for
So
real.
I'm like, wow. I mean, that was amazing for me that, to have access to musicians of this caliber. And then
That's
Terry
great.
Branham on the drums, he's kind of like the modern drummer transcription guru. So there's not a drummer he hasn't transcribed. And then on keyboards, Matt Lebowski, who's also played in a ton of different bands. And so I mean, I'm super blessed to have this amazing band behind me
Of
that can
course.
bring some of these crazy ideas to fruition.
Right. And listen, I want to throw it to you and you don't have to say too much, but can you talk a little bit about the original stuff that you're making?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, let's do it. So yeah, obviously this is, the mashups are one thing. What can we expect in the original realm?
Well, look, my background, kind of as we discussed before, I come from, being raised on the oldies and the
Yeah,
Beatles and that kind of 60s stuff. And then my own taste developed more into 70s progressive rock. That was really my thing. But of course, I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s. So all the pop music of the 80s, all the grunge of the 90s, that's all, floating in there. I'm also, big fan of classical music,
yeah,
always have been. And so all those things come together. So when you ask me my favorite bands, a lot of them are the ones that were covered on the album. But I'm not here to make 20-minute sidelong epics. Like just because I love that music from the 70s doesn't mean
I
that that's what I'm
understand.
trying to do. So there'll be songs here that are in odd time signatures, but they're pop songs in a way. They're
Okay.
rock songs. They're not like nerdy math rock for the sake of it. And I said that to the guys. I'm like, look, guys, like you look at the chart and you'd be like, oh my God, this is in 15/8. I'm like, yeah, but it's a pop song. I want it to
Right.
sound like a pop song. And again, when you have musicians who are not just math rock nerds, like they've played all different kinds of stuff and they know how to take and distill the best parts of that genre and make it sound smooth, make it sound like a good rock pop song. I mean, that's what I'm going for. The kind of things that there's always that bit of surprise. I don't like straightforward stuff.
Yeah,
I don't just like the simplest kind of song, although sometimes that's beautiful, and sometimes that's the hardest thing to do is to write a really simple song.
it's true.
But I like a bit of sophistication. But I like to keep it simple but deceptively simple. That's kind of my rule.
Nice. I think that's a great answer because it kind of gives two sides of the coin here. I think anyone who discovers you is probably going to discover the mashups, but then they do a little digging, they see that there's originals coming.
Right.
Obviously, like I'm not in your brain, but if I could step in for 1 second, someone who has spent so much time putting together a mashup album clearly has original ideas for something original. So is there a release schedule for like a first single? Obviously, you're in the studio right now doing this, but like when can people potentially expect to hear what you're making?
Okay, so very good question because I've been in the studio. This is the fourth time I've come to the studio. So
Okay.
there's stuff that's already packaged and ready to go. So the idea was I was going to put out an EP of the first few originals and a couple other covers that I did that were not mashups.
Okay. Of
But then when I started learning, because this has been a learning process for me, it was learning going
course.
into the studio and figuring out how that works because I'm still thinking of the music industry the way it was when I grew up, which is entirely different, which is,
Yeah.
you need to have a huge record, you need to be a rock star. You need to have a record label
Not
that's going to spend
anymore.
$250,000 to send you into a studio. That's
Exactly.
what I thought. And it was during the pandemic that I realized, especially with the advice of Dan, that, you can hire, first of all, everybody's sitting at home. Even the best musicians in the world are sitting at home. You can hire really, really skilled people, and it's not going to break the bank to be able to make an album. So
True.
that's kind of how I came into this. But then the second bit of learning has been just about how to market music because it's not the same old thing where okay, and now in my 40s I'm going to become a rock star and sell out stadiums. Like that doesn't exist anymore, and that's ludicrous. I have a regular life. I have kids and all of that.
Right.
But there's a way to these days to find that niche of people, to find your community, to find your audience of people who are interested in your stuff. So I started researching all that, and what I realized is that you don't just release an album just like that.
No.
You drip them, do what they call the waterfall strategy, dripping single
Exactly.
by single. I said, well, if I've already got 4 or 5 songs, and I'm going to take 4 to 6 weeks to promote each of those with videos and
Mhm.
micro content and all of that. By the time I'm done with that, that's half a year. That's enough time to finish another 4 or 5 songs, and therefore, when I'm done dripping, I have a whole album. So that's what these sessions are about. It's basically
Very cool.
completing instead of putting out an EP, put out a full album. So
Nice.
that's where that came from.
Very cool. Listen, there's, a lot of people in the independent music space, they get very excited about, I have an album, and they put the album up and people listen, but then they forget that it existed two
Yeah.
weeks later because of the release schedule that people are working on. The way you're going about it is the best way to do it. Create the hype, get people excited, and let them know that there's more on the way. That's really
Well,
all.
look, I mean, it's easy to say, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of learning. I mean, and some like in everything in life, sometimes you just get lucky, and something catches on. At the same time, there's this ongoing debate. Should you just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks? And there's those that say, yes, just do that. And others that say, no, really put your best stuff out there, which I find funny because, some of these songs, I mean, I've been writing songs since I was a teenager. Some of these are
Sure.
25 and 30 years old that are now finally getting into the studio.
Right.
So when people say, put out, you really don't want to put out mid material, put out your best material. But that's really hard to do. I said, okay, but when you've got 25 years of backlog, it's not that hard to put out
Right.
your first album of good stuff. So this stuff will start coming out in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
And the full album will be done. Let's say within the next 6 months, the full album will be released. And then there's another album, another covers concept, which is a different kind of mashup concept, which is Vivaldi's Four Seasons
Oh,
used as a backing track for pop songs. So that's another mind-blowing covers idea. So,
interesting.
um, for example, well, I won't spoil it now, but
Yeah, that's
basically each
okay.
of the
But
12
listen, when you're
movements of
done with
Vivaldi's,
it, please send it
yes,
my way.
we
I
will. So
definitely
basically,
want to check
what
that
I'm
out.
saying is there's lots of stuff coming out. I've got the engine is in gear, the wheels
Yeah.
are in motion. The band is gelled. And it's been a great ride so far. I'm really excited to put stuff out officially on Spotify and the like, which, as we said, I haven't been able to do
Yeah.
with the mashups. So, the future looks really bright, and I'm excited.
I'm excited, man. Listen, I got a couple more questions for you.
Yes.
I want to know, listen, your influences are vast, literal decades of sound and style and everything. And then you're working on originals. Is there anything recently, not even necessarily in the mainstream, but just artist or band wise that you've listened to that you enjoyed that you're kind of taking inspiration from now for the original?
That's a really good question, and I've learned that it's homework because
Yeah, it's a full-time
because
job.
what you need to do is because all right, it's like you make rock music, oh, and people say, oh, it sounds like the Beatles. Well, duh. I mean, every rock music sounds like the Beatles. This was just so foundational. But
Right.
what you need to do if you want to promote your stuff is find out who are, as you said, who are current acts that have the kind of sound and have a built-in following that you can try to
Totally.
position your stuff to. So I am in the process of learning about all of these bands, and also the musicians that I'm playing with have played with tons of amazing people in different
Sure.
kinds of projects. So I'm learning from all of that, and different genres. So when I was young, I was very much a classic rock snob.
Mhm.
With age and wisdom, I've learned that there's pop music like Taylor Swift that's also great to
Of
learn from.
course.
And so I try to take it all in, make it my own. and do something that I have fun doing, that I enjoy doing. You know, when people say, "Oh, you know, who are you writing this for? Who did you write that song for?" I said, "I've never written even a love song. It's not written for anybody. It's written for me. If anyone
Yeah.
else appreciates it, that's great. But that's what, to me, what the artist does, integrates all of these different influences and create something new out of it. And you know, if people love it, that I'd be delighted. And if they don't, you know, if a good friend of mine listened to the first demo of the that crazy Bach Stairway to Heaven cover that it was on that
Right.
concludes the album and took off the headphones and said, "Who's going to listen to this?"
You'd be
And I said,
surprised.
"I'm going to listen to it. I
Yes.
made it because I wish that it existed. That's why I made it. But if I like it, other people will like it too. I'm sure of that." And so here we are.
I'm not even joking. You took the words right out of my mouth. So many times I say, who is this music for? Why are you doing it? You make the music you want to hear. You're
100%.
the one spending the time, the energy, the money to put this thing together. If you're making music for other people, then what's the point? You know
Right.
what I'm saying? You're not fulfilling your own artistic needs, and that's what it's
Exactly.
all about at the end of the day.
Exactly. And you know, as you get older, you also think about, you know, what do I leave behind?
Right.
Um, you know, as the you know, as the song says, you know, all your money won't another minute buy. But you
I
know,
agree.
doing this, you know, we leave behind the way the people that we influence, people that we love, and all of that. But
Sure.
this is something that will last forever, and I'm proud of that. And I think any artist would understand that.
Lastly, here, I want to know, across the covers, across the originals, really across anything, is there anything super important you think people should know before they kind of dive into your world?
No, I would say just come at it with an open mind, like you would any music, and don't don't be surprised if things seem simple or seem complicated. And just enjoy it. I mean, it's there for someone to smile or have fun or tap their foot or whatever. You know, I don't have any expectations in the listener other than to enjoy it and to have fun. And if I had fun making it, then you know the listener should, and the guys had fun playing it and creating it. Even the songs that are sad. I mean, this is the thing. People think, why do happy people make sad music? Because some of the songs are, some of the originals have a
Sure.
bit of melancholy in them. And when we're in the middle of doing that, we're not whipping ourselves and crying and
Of course not.
dressed up in goth or whatever.
Yeah,
We're laughing and joking and being sarcastic with each other
sure.
while we're making songs about the pain of dying or or mortality, facing mortality or anything like that. But it's the joy of living that we're communicating, not the pain of life. It's the joy of life that comes through in giving something that someone can relate to and say, that made me feel better. And what else? Again, what else can an artist ask for than to make that connection?
I completely agree. I could not have said it better myself. George, I truly want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your
I thank
schedule
you as
to
well,
do
Austin. It was
this.
great.
Please let me plug your music one more time before we wrap up here. So if
Please
you
do.
didn't know, the group's name is The Agency. There's a whole record out called To Be Arranged, but there's so much more in the works right now that is literally being worked on right after we
Yes.
finish this. We'll have the links everywhere so that you can listen, share, follow along, all that good stuff. And truly, again, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Likewise, Austin. Thanks so much for all you do.
Awesome. All right. Take care. We'll speak soon.
Speak
Bye
to
bye.
you soon. Thank you.
See
Bye bye.
you. Bye.